Hey, welcome into Courageous Media. Thanks so much for joining me here. I wanted to record a quick video and talk about the news of the day, really the news, frankly, of the year, of the last 5 years. And that is that Donald Trump has met in a one-on-one summit. Actually, it was like a three-on-three summit with President Putin of Russia. This has not happened really since the Helsinki summit back in Trump's first term. The Biden administration never met with Putin. The Biden administration specifically snubbed Putin. We're going to get into all that on this historic day. Thanks so much for rolling up. Really appreciate everybody being here. Thanks for joining us here on Courageous Media. Please smash that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. But let's dive right in. We've got some snapshots of the day. Donald Trump just playing the power moves, the alpha, the art of the deal. We're going to dive into all that. Check this out from the opening of this summit when Trump meets Putin on the tarmac at the joint base in Anchorage. This is great stuff. We got two videos. You got to watch the first to understand the second. Here we go. All right, so here's Trump and Putin meeting. Trump with the alpha handshake draws him in. It's his class. It's a typical Trump move. It's Trump's classic kind of signature opening. Grabs the hand, pulls him in. One thing that is striking to notice is he's a whole head taller than Putin. I mean, Trump is a tall man, and Putin is not, which I think somewhat puts him at a little bit of a disadvantage. Yes, subconsciously. But as they're walking down the red carpet, you've got to see this. This is just classic stuff. This is Trump planning the art of the deal from before the meeting even begins. You can hear him in the background. And Putin is like, what? What's going on? What's happening? All right. And then they come up, they pause, they say, they shake hands, then they walk off. But you've got to see this. I want you to show you this other angle because what Trump planned was absolutely a classic move. So as they're walking up, Trump has arranged for a low-level flyby of a B-2 flanked by 4 F-22s, the primo weapons of the U.S. aerial arsenal, which are unmatched by Russia. Russia has nothing that even comes close to an F-22, and we're already working on Gen 5 fighters. And what Russia has can't even compare to what we've got that was built 20 years ago, let alone the B-2 stealth bomber, which Russia has no answer for. In fact, most of their old decrepit strategic bomber force was destroyed by Ukraine in a drone attack. This is the ultimate power move. This is what Trump planned before they even got started. It's all prearranged. There it is. Low-level flyby. You can see that Putin was surprised. Stunned may not be the word, certainly surprised. He certainly wasn't expecting it, and he was certainly put off guard by it. Because here you are walking, you're on foreign soil, and there's a low-level flyby of military aircraft that you cannot match. It was a power move by Trump. It was, I've got the military cards, just so you know, just to plant it in your subconscious that if you want to tangle with us, it's not going to go well. You haven't even managed to conquer Ukraine, who has nothing other than what we've given them. And you don't want to tangle with our arsenal. I think that was the subtle message, the subconscious message behind that. It can be shrugged off as, hey, just wanted to welcome you to the U.S. with a military flyby in your honor. But the subtle message was absolutely clear. Now, to get into what happened during the day. So Trump and Putin met for about 3.5 hours. That included a working lunch with other members of their team. That it was not a one-on-one summit. It was a 3-on-3 summit. It was Trump, Marco Rubio, and I believe it was Steve Witkoff, the special envoy. So it was the three of them, and I believe it was Putin, Lavrov, and I'm not sure who their third was. So it was a 3-on-3 followed by a broader working lunch to try to hammer something out. Now, as you heard Trump say before he ever left, I'll know in the first 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes if we can get somewhere. Well, something was very clear when they stepped up to that press conference after the meeting. So they had met for 3.5 hours. Then they stepped up to a press conference. And in that press conference, it was very clear that it was a highly productive and albeit quote unquote successful meeting to the point that it could be. Because there can be no deal at this point because they haven't involved Zelensky and the European powers. However, the two people driving this thing are Putin and Trump. They're the only two who can truly veto it. They're the only two who can truly come to a framework that gets the ball rolling. So I want to check this out. I want you to check this out because one of the first things that Putin does, and we're going to check out the clip where he says, that we basically got an agreement. Putin does two things in his first 6 minutes of remarks at the very beginning. He basically says, hey, we've reached a point of an agreement and we really want to move forward and we really want peace. The second thing he does is he throws not just shade, but he just piles crap onto the Biden Kamala administration and praises Trump all at the same time. He's clearly heard Trump say over and over again, if I was president, this war never would have happened. And because he knows Trump and because he wants to be in his good graces, and also because he understands that is the truth, check out his remarks very early on in his press conference.
I'd like to remind you that in 2022, during the last contact with the previous administration, I tried to convince my previous American colleague that the situation should not be brought to the point of no return when it would come to hostilities. And I said it quite directly back then that it's a big mistake. Today, when President Trump is saying that if he was the president back then, there will be no war. And I'm quite sure that it would indeed be so. I can confirm that. I think that overall, me and President Trump have built a very good, business-like and trustworthy contact. And I have every reason to believe that moving down this path, we can come, and the sooner the better, to the end of the conflict in Ukraine.
Wow. So not only, hey, me and Trump have a great working relationship. I think we can reach peace. But, oh, by the way, those buffoons, those idiots in the previous administration, I tried to tell them in 2022, let's not push this to the point of war. And they wouldn't listen. Now, we know from a lot of the newly declassified Russia hoax materials and the other things that DNI, Tulsi Gabbard, and Ratcliffe have made public. There was an overture. We now know there was an overture from Putin, from the Russian government to the Biden administration before the war kicked off that basically said, hey, you have pushed us to the point of no return. But this is all we need. All we want is just put in writing that Ukraine will never be part of NATO. Just do that, and we can avoid this whole thing. Putin was trying from the beginning not to go to war. I'm not saying Putin's a great guy. He has clearly invaded Ukraine, and he's clearly killed a lot of civilians. But this thing could have been stopped even by Biden and the Biden administration 4 years ago. But no. When Putin said, hey, just put it in writing that you won't let Ukraine into NATO, which was the official position of the US and NATO going back, decades, they wouldn't do it. And instead, what they did is they paraded the bumbling buffoon Kamala Harris over to Eastern Europe, where on Russia's doorstep, she basically says, we're going to admit Ukraine to Russia. Without saying those exact words, she laid it out that Ukraine would become part of NATO and thumbed her nose at the Russian delegation, at the Russian government, at Putin, and basically flipped them off. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and their administration, I believe we now know from Putin's comments and from the declassified material, they started this war on purpose. They goaded the Russians. They purposely needled the Russians with Ukrainian NATO membership to the point of no return. They brought the US, the European Union, and Ukraine into this war with Russia for their own monetary gain. I believe is to get rich. I believe that of the hundreds of billions of dollars that has supposedly been given to Ukraine, and much of it has disappeared, a lot of that money has been laundered. And I believe it's been laundered back into the pockets of Joe Biden, of Kamala Harris, of Anthony Blinken, Clapper, Brennan, and others. They, I believe, are the ones truly responsible behind the scenes for this war. Because we know that Putin made an overture. We now know from the declassified documents he made an overture. Just say that Ukraine won't be part of NATO, and they wouldn't do it. So he basically says, hey, if Trump was president, this war wouldn't have happened. I can confirm that, he said. I can confirm that. This is amazing stuff. And then said, we have a great working relationship, and I think we have a framework. Now, check this out. Here they're talking about the fact that they have reached an agreement. Now, we don't know what that agreement is. We don't know the details, but this is amazing stuff. Check this out.
Agree with President Trump, as he has said today, that naturally the security of Ukraine should be ensured as well. Naturally, we are prepared to work on that. I would like to hope that the agreement that we've reached together will help us bring closer that goal and will pave the path towards peace in Ukraine. We expect that Kiev and European capitals will perceive that constructively and that they won't throw a wrench in the work. They will not make any attempts to use some backroom dealings to conduct provocations to torpedo the nascent progress.
Absolutely. So now he's basically saying we have an agreement. Trump and I have reached a framework, call it a framework, call it he calls it a nascent agreement. Basically, they've reached a memorandum of understanding, if you want to put it in business terms. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to solve this conflict. And it's now up to basically Trump to go back to NATO, to the European Union, to Zelensky, and for them not to torpedo this thing. Not only did the Biden administration essentially start this war by needling the Russians into it, by goading them into it, but they prevented it from being ended barely a year later, when it became apparent to Putin that he was not going to reach Kyiv in a week. He wasn't going to reach Kyiv in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 5 weeks or 10 weeks, that this was going to bog down into a long, protracted meat grinder. Putin was trying to get out. And clearly the sanctions and other things were having an effect on the economy, not as much as we wanted to or wanted to believe, but it was in Putin's best interest to get out. And so they had the peace talks in Istanbul, and they had an agreement. Putin and Zelensky had come to an agreement. They were about ready to end the war when the European Union and the Biden administration trotted over the British Prime Minister to basically tell Putin, no, don't do this. Nope, do not sign the agreement. We will give you money. We will support you. We will help you win this war. These people wanted a proxy war. The globalist cabal of corruptocrats wanted. They wanted to try to destroy Russia. They were hoping, I think, they would get some sort of internal regime change in Russia if they could prolong this war. Plus, they also knew that there were hundreds of billions of dollars floating around that they could launder. And they were all in for the destruction of Ukraine because now they can give Ukraine money. Attached to that money is loan guarantees. Those loan guarantees are not backed by the full faith and credit of the Ukrainian government. No, they're backed by all of Ukraine's natural assets, primarily food, rare earth minerals, farmland, that now places like BlackRock and Monsanto are going to be able to, they think, come in and swoop up when Ukraine can't make these payments. They never wanted this thing to end. You're absolutely right, Greg. They did. They told the English Prime Minister to go over there and basically end this thing, and he did. They had an agreement 3 years ago. Now, let's keep going, because Trump basically confirms what Putin just said. Check this out. It's great stuff. Trump essentially says we made great progress, and here's Trump's side of the story.
I believe we had a very productive meeting. There were many, many points that we agreed on, most of them, I would say, a couple of big ones that we haven't quite gotten there, but we've made some headway. So there's no deal until there's a deal. I will call up NATO in a little while. I will call up the various people that I think are appropriate, and I'll, of course, call up President Zelensky and tell him about today's meeting. It's ultimately up to them. They're going to have to agree with what Marco and Steve and some of the great people from the Trump administration who've come here, Scott and John Ratcliffe. Thank you very much. But we have some of our really great leaders. They've been doing a phenomenal job. We also have some tremendous Russian business representatives here, and I think everybody wants to deal with us. We've become the hottest country anywhere in the world in a very short period of time, and we look forward to that. We look forward to dealing. We're going to try and get this over with. We really made some great progress today.
Now, so Trump reiterates what Putin said. We got the framework for the agreement. And Trump says, hey, it's on me now. I'm going to be calling Zelensky. I'm going to be calling NATO. I'm going to be letting them know what we've agreed to, because only Zelensky can essentially agree to what we've essentially promoted as a framework. This is what I believe. And this is all inference, because other than what you're seeing, these clips, everybody's been very tight-lipped about what was actually talked about. Here's what I think probably is the guts of this agreement. And it's because this goes back to what I think Ukraine wanted from the get-go. I mean, from what Russia wanted from the get-go. The most important thing they wanted, I believe, was security guarantees that Ukraine will never be part of NATO. They have said for 50 years that they don't want NATO on their actual doorstep, and Ukraine was always that. Now, were there some other motives that they had? Did they want it? They want to lure Ukraine to the Russian sphere of influence? Absolutely. I mean, they want what's in their bed. They want to make Russia great again. I mean, they want Russia first. But I believe there's two main points to this. One, Russia or Ukraine will not join NATO, and I believe Trump has probably negotiated essentially, hey, you take the Russian-speaking, Russian Orthodox, essentially ethnic Russian parts of Ukraine, which is really the Donbass, right? It's really that eastern, 20 miles to whatever it is, 200 miles. It's that eastern sliver of Russia. They're going to keep Crimea. Crimea was never on the table. They were never going to get Crimea back. Ukraine was, I mean, that's been gone for 10 years now. But I believe what Trump has probably said is, hey, you keep the Russian-speaking portion of Ukraine. If that satisfies you and Ukraine doesn't join NATO, let's end this thing. And frankly, that's, in a lot of ways, that's a win-win. Yeah, is Ukraine giving up some land? Sure they are. But realize that for the last 10 years or so, that land has been embroiled in a constant simmering, basically civil war. Because it's Russian speaking, it's ethnically Russian, they're Russian Orthodox. They have been persecuted, they have been discriminated against by the Ukrainian government and by Ukrainians. They want to be part of Russia. They're part of this constant tension within the Ukraine. Do they shift to the Russian sphere of influence? Do they mirror Moscow, or do they float towards the US and Brussels? Which way do they go? Do they want to be part of the European Union? Do they want to be part of the Russian sphere of influence? And part of that tension is because you've got this whole section of the country that speaks Russian. Primarily, they do not speak Ukrainian. They're Russian Orthodox. They're not Ukrainian Orthodox. And they're highly religious. And they've been persecuted by the Ukrainian government. And so why not get rid of a major conflict in your country, which will continually simmer, and end this thing and end the 5,000 lives a week that are basically lost? So that's what I believe is happening. Let me know what you think in the comments. But Trump, so after this, Putin and Trump have both signaled we have an agreement. It's now up to Zelensky and the European Union not to F it up, not to torpedo it, not to throw a wrench in it, not to dork it up, but let's make this happen. And at the very end, Putin says this. This I thought was one of the sound bites of the day. This is absolutely great stuff. Check this out, because I think this signals, it gives you a lot of insight as to how the day went.
I'd like to thank you very much, and we'll speak to you very soon and probably see you again very soon. Thank you very much, Vladimir.
Next time in Moscow.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I don't know. I'll get a little heat on that one, but I could see it possibly happening. Thank you very much, Vladimir.
Now, Vladimir Putin speaks very broken English, and nowhere else in this summit did you hear him publicly speak English. Now, there's a couple of times that he whispered to Trump, like on the red carpet, that you wonder, was he speaking English, or was he just using, thank you, or hey, good to meet you, was he speaking English in any capacity whatsoever? But the one time he says anything in English in public, he says next time in Moscow. I love Trump. I'm going to get some heat on that one. Yeah, the Secret Service is not going to be thrilled with that one. But I think that would be a major coup for world relations, for world peace, and for US-Russian relations. Would love to see that happen. But that's how they ended it right before they walked off, was Trump essentially thanking him, saying, we will see you again. And remember, Trump said on Air Force One flying out that if this is not a good meeting, there won't be a second meeting. That the goal of this meeting was to get to the second meeting where they could actually hammer things out. And he said, if this is unsuccessful, there won't be a second meeting. Well, there's clearly going to be a second meeting, or at least the overtures of one. And in that, Putin goes, hey, next time, come to Moscow. And I love the fact that Trump said, hey, whether I get heat or not, I think that's a possibility. Now, the last power move that they pulled, or a series of power moves, is summed up in this at the very end of the press conference. So check this out. This is how they ended it. They've got a whole press room full of people, full of reporters, just dying to ask gotcha questions and try to trap them. Check this out.
Very soon. Thank you very much, Vladimir.
Next time in Moscow.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I don't know. I'll get a little heat on that one, but I could see it possibly happening. Thank you very much, Vladimir. And thank you all. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Now, just so you know, this one right here is Caitlin Collins, CNN, buffoon, queen buffoon of the TDS crowd. Just so you know. But here we go. Everybody clamoring to ask questions, and Putin and Trump are like, thanks, see ya. Hey, glad you flew 9 hours to sit in a press room and listen to literally 12 minutes of comments. He got the entire Trump-hating press to fly 9 hours around the world, well, not around the world, some of them, world press, some of them flew around the world, but the US Trump deranged press flew, 7 or 8 hours from DC and New York to Anchorage, Alaska, to sit basically and pontificate and speculate for several hours while they met behind closed doors, to come to a press briefing where they got 12 minutes of comments, and then Trump and Putin are like, yeah, have high five, talk to the hand, we're out. Not a single question. Absolutely amazing. Now, the other thing that's very telling in this is that Putin had a scheduled interview. Evidently, he had a scheduled interview with Brett Baer of Fox. And based on this meeting, that interview was canceled. They decided, I believe, this is my personal take on this, that Putin and Trump decided that this was such a successful meeting that two things are going to happen. We're not going to talk to the press afterwards. We're not going to take questions. We're not going to let them get us into gotchas and sound bites and whatnot. So we're out. And Putin also said, yeah, to that end, I'm not doing the interview with Brett Baer. Now, Trump did do a very short interview later on, hours later, with Sean Hannity. We got a soundbite from that. But essentially, they went radio silence after this thing. And Trump got immediately on the phone and started talking to NATO leaders and Zelensky about the results of this meeting. And this is amazing stuff. I think we made serious progress here. Check out this last clip as Trump talks to Sean Hannity following the conference. All right, check this out.
Most people, as they analyze this from the outside, this is how almost everybody's kind of universal thinking, how this ends. There's going to be some land swaps. There will be more Russian territory than there had been. And what Ukraine wants and needs desperately are security measures that won't be NATO related. If you had to look into your crystal ball, is that how it ends?
Well, I think those are points that we negotiated, and those are points that we largely have agreed on, actually. I think we've agreed on a lot. And I can tell you, the meeting was a very warm meeting. He's a strong guy, he's tough as hell and all of that. But the meeting was a very warm meeting between two very important countries, and it's very good when they get along. I think we're pretty close to a deal. Now, look, Ukraine has to agree to it. Maybe they'll say no.
At this point, if Ukraine says no, I think they will lose all support, certainly all support from the United States. Maybe they'll get support from the other European countries, but I think that Trump's got this thing to the doorstep. And because of the leverage he now has, because essentially he has asserted his alpha dominance over NATO, over the European Union. I mean, we just got the trade deal signed where the European Union basically ponied up a whole bunch of money and are still paying 15% tariffs. I think he can get this thing done. Now, this is my take. In studying this, I think this is what got Putin to the table. I think Putin, I don't think he really wants to be in this war. I think he sees it. There's two. It's hard for him to get out of it. A, B. I think that if he gets out of it and loses face, he really faces some dogged odds of not being president of Russia anymore. And I think really, as the old saying goes, he wants what every first term president wants a second term. Now he's probably on his 10th term. I don't know, but he wants to stay in power. And to that end, he's been very strategic inside Russia how he's propagated this war. The conscription has not come for anybody in Moscow or St. Petersburg or anybody in the upper or middle class. They have gone out and conscripted from the rural areas. They've paid people, essentially 50 grand, right? They've given them big signing bonuses to come, be conscripted into the military where they're essentially cannon fodder, but they're all from rural areas that no one in the elite Russian society cares about. So he hasn't damaged those relationships with the people, the power brokers. He's been very careful with that. I think what got him to the table was they realized their economy probably sits on a knife edge. Right now, they're still selling oil to India, primarily India and China. If they stop selling that oil, I think their economy goes off a cliff. That's my personal opinion. Well, Trump essentially signaled that he was going to put in place secondary sanctions, he went to India first and said, if Putin doesn't come to the table and you keep buying oil from Putin, we're going to hit you with 100% tariffs or 150 or more. You will not sell a product in the United States. And he could do the same thing to China. He could shut off Russian oil sales with secondary tariffs, and we could survive those tariffs. Russia could not. And those two economies in India and China would have serious problems surviving those tariffs. So we could withstand them far longer than China or India could. It would damage everybody. But the real loser would be Putin because he wouldn't sell any oil. Because eventually those economies would be like, okay, fine. All we have to do is not buy oil from Russia. Okay, we won't do it. I think that's what got Putin to the table. I think Putin really wants a deal, but at the same time, he wants it a little bit on his terms. I think he needs the two things we talked about. He needs the Donbass region so that he can go back and save face inside Russia. And he needs the no NATO membership for Ukraine because that was the driving force of this thing from the very beginning. That's my personal opinion. Let me know what you think in the comments. Really appreciate everybody being here. Like I said, I want to do a short video, kind of recap what we saw from this historic moment. Trump meets with Putin. This hasn't happened in about 7 years. Putin completely throws shade on the Biden administration, essentially rolls them under the bus, steamrolls them with this war was their fault. They had the option to stop it. They didn't do it. Then they had the option in Istanbul to end it. They didn't do it. At both times, they actively promoted war. And I think it was for their own financial aggrandizement. That's what I think. And for the benefit of the deep state and the detriment of America, Russia, and Ukraine. I think we're going to find out more of that as they declassify more of this stuff. This Biden administration has been so utterly criminal and corrupt. There needs to be accountability. That's a different story, a different video for a different day. Trump, the art of the deal on the world stage, winning. America is the focus of the world again. We are the alpha dog, and it's because we have an alpha president who puts America first. Thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate everybody rolling up. Remember, God is good and he is sovereign. It'll all be good in the end. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and share Courageous Media with everybody that you know. If you're so inclined, please hit that join. Become a member of Courageous Army. Help support the show. Until I catch you next time, have a great evening.